What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. So today we are doing that other promised video that we talked about, the Abby Jimenez review. Now, as you may know, if you have been to our channel before, we did do a breakdown of the 3 books within the Part of Your World series that was written by Abby Jimenez and publicized by Book of the Month. It was a fan favorite that was all across the internet. So many people were raving about it. And the 3rd book in that series, Just for the Summer, came out this year. After delving into all 3 of those books and just being blown away by Abby Jimenez and her writing in those books, I had to do a review about the 3 books. During that process of reading them, obviously Abby Jimenez became a fan favorite and a author that I would love to follow moving forward as she puts out more works. And I was excited to find out that she actually had another trilogy that she had written. And so I absolutely had to read those and review those. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the Friend Zone and the books in that 3-part series. So if that's something that interests you, definitely stick around. Thank you so much for joining me. For those who are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Jaya and I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday for bookish related content with a little sprinkling of travel vlogs and random other things dispersed in between. I love everything related to books. I genuinely read because I enjoy it and I love it. I do primarily read fiction because for me it's an escape. It's a way to keep your imagination going and it's just so much fun. And for those who also love books within this bookish community, I would love to have you here with us as well. We do read some nonfiction here and there, classics here and there, but really try to stick within a vast plethora of the fiction genre. That being said, this particular month has been more romance heavy just because summer for me is like easy peasy books, something that's going to put a little smile on your face and just enjoyable. If that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, I would love to have you here as part of our community, so do consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. If you are coming back to join us for another video, well then welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and without further ado, let's get into the video. So, guys, I have to say, I think it was a mistake to read her newer books before tapping into the older books, because I will say that you can definitely see that there's a change in the way Abby Jimenez writes. You can see the quality that's in the newer books, aka the Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and Just for the Summer series that she wrote. This series, I think, had less of an oomph for me. It was harder for me to relate to the characters, but that being said, they were still a fun read. So let's talk about the first book, The Friend Zone. I'm so sorry, the light is like majorly reflecting off of this and this is terrible, but there we go. This is the first book called The Friend Zone. I think The Friend Zone was an excellent novel. I do think, however, that it fell flat for me just because I had a really hard time connecting with both the female lead as well as the male lead. I felt personally that the female lead was irrationally upset. Like, I do think that her medical issue was a very real one, and I think a lot of women do struggle with that. And basically the essence of this book is that there is concerns that she may never be able to bear a child. Meanwhile, her love interest is a sexy fireman who comes into town to basically be there for a new job as well as support his best friend and his fiance as they're about to walk into the throes of marriage and celebrate their wedding together. And so he wanted to be there to support them. And the main female lead is the best friend of the fiance. And so the main characters' names, Kristen and Josh, are both wonderful characters. I think individually they're very entertaining to read about. They have a lot to say. Kristen in particular is very feisty, spicy as a character. I think she's fun to just read because she has a lot to say about everything and she doesn't always have a filter, which is great. I think the banter between her and her best friend Sloane is also very cute to watch, and I do think that Abby did a beautiful job of kind of introducing that character of Sloane as she would be the main character for the second book. Josh's character, who is the fireman, was also very interesting and fun to read. His best friend, Brandon, is the one who's getting married, and so he wants to be there to support him. And also he just got out of a really terrible relationship where his ex basically said that she never wanted to have children and kind of took over his life and kept his apartment and his possessions and things like that. So he's basically coming out of this really tragic breakup, moving to this new city, and he and Kristen have a meet cute. And I'm not going to ruin that meet cute because I do think that meet cute in particular was very cute and funny and just entertaining to read. But let's just say it starts off very prickly and then kind of goes from there. What I will say is that Kristen's character was also difficult for me to read because she was doing a long distance relationship for over 2 years with another character before she meets Josh. And so I think overall, the fact that she's an entrepreneur, the fact that she's independent, the fact that she has had a very privileged life with a very difficult relationship with her mom, the fact that it kind of speaks to her as a female lead character, going after her passions and her interests and kind of creating this life for herself. That part was very fun to read. I think from the perspective of Josh, it was really fun to read his viewpoints on falling in love and, you know, his thought processes on being with friends and the value of friendships. All of that was really lovely. Pardon me. All of that was really lovely. I think the part that really frustrated me, though, was the actual romance between those two characters and then the main wrench in that relationship because the communication was shit poor. Pardon my language, but that's true. Like, I just felt like a lot of the angst of that situation could have been avoided if they just communicated with each other. I also think that communication needed to happen early on in the book because by not having that conversation early on in the book, they kind of set themselves up for a lot of pain and a lot of trust issues and just problems moving forward in their relationship. So I do think that's something that needed to be addressed better, but if you had done that, you wouldn't have a novel. So there's also that. I think overall, this particular book was a solid 2.5, 3 stars for me. It wasn't terrible. It's not an awful book. I think it was a very entertaining, fast-paced, fun read. But did it have anything on Part of Your World series for me? Not so much. I didn't find myself crying. I didn't find myself like reaching for a tissue box. I didn't feel myself going through all the feels. I think I could enjoy the story and I was plugged into the story. Like I paid attention to the whole thing. But it wasn't something that I was like, ooh, I'm going to cherish this novel forever. And this is like going to be on my A-list selection. And I'm going to recommend it to every single person on the planet. No. I do think that if someone were to ask me, do I need to read Abby Jimenez? I would absolutely say yes. And if they were to ask me, is she a fun writer? I would absolutely say yes. I would also say that if you are interested in following her as an author and seeing her growth, definitely start with The Friend Zone and that series and then move on to Part of Your World because I think Part of Your World is substantially better. But that was the first book in that series. The second book that comes up after that is the Happily Ever After playlist. Now, I'm having a little bit of a hard time talking about this book, so I would suggest that if you are interested in reading the first book, just go ahead and skip this portion because there is going to be some spoilers. So I am saying this at 8:08 in the video, and I will let you guys know when to hop back on. But so as I mentioned, you have the spoilers up until about 10 minutes and 40 seconds of this video. So go ahead and skip to that 10-minute and 40-second mark if you do want to avoid that spoiler. Thanks, guys. The Happily Ever After playlist was a little bit tricky because it follows the main character, Sloane. Now, as you know, in the first book, I had just mentioned that the best friend had been engaged. So the fact that she's the primary plot point of this book might show that she's going through her own thing. The thing is, in order to read this novel and to appreciate Sloane's character, I feel like you have to have a vital piece of information, and that vital piece of information is the fact that her fiance passes away. And I think that is critical in understanding Sloane because this now takes place 2 years after the death of her fiance. She's still going through severe depression. She's still dealing with this tragedy that's occurred in her life, this sense of not being able to trust the universe again, of not being sure if she's ever going to find love again. So from that perspective, you kind of get glimpses of how terrible she's been over the past 2 years. She's finally gotten to a point where she can at least get out of bed and take care of herself, but she's awful at first. Like she completely falls apart, which is understandable, right? I mean, she wants to save bottles and, you know, glasses that he's drank out of from 2 years ago because she's not ready to let him go. She still has all of his clothes. The entire house is almost like a mausoleum to their life together. And she's really struggling. She is an artist. She's a very well-reputed artist. She has had celebrated artistic pieces that have been looked for by various galleries and things like that. She does hyper-realistic art, meaning she can take a bunch of photos from one particular view and recreate that painting, but it's an oil painting, but it looks like a photograph. Like, she's like very, very good at that type of art. However, she's now doing ridiculous paintings just to make ends meet. Like, she's literally making a painting of a cat as an astronaut when she meets her main character. Now, the whole thing that kind of drives this story is the dog. There's a dog. You have to appreciate the dog. The dog is the best part. So basically what happens is she's driving out. She's about to go celebrate the 2-year death mark of her fiance. And she's just proud of herself putting clothes on and getting in the car. And all of a sudden a dog basically jumps in front of her car in the middle of ongoing traffic and decides to hop in through the sunroof and hang out with her. And the whole book kind of starts with her trying to figure out who this dog's owner is. And that's how you cue in the male character romantic lead in this book. And I think like that's great and everything, but it was just one of those things where I was like, I'm struggling. I think the speed at which she recovered and she was going through her emotional range was a little too fast-paced for me. I also think that the physical attraction was dwelled upon a little too much, and that was problematic for me personally because I think there has to be more depth than that in the story. But that being said, I think Sloane's character in particular was really interesting to read because it was interesting to see her go through these emotions and go through this experience and finally claw her way out of this depression that she's in. And I think the main male character is also very interesting to read because he is a famous musician. He's just now creating his fame. He's going on tours. And unfortunately, with the film industry, obviously, everything is about reputation. Everything is about presentation. Everything is about how you are portrayed to the society. And so there's a lot of things that are going on in the background that he's not aware that his company may or may not be orchestrating. He doesn't know if it's like a crazy fanatic co-star that's causing the drama. He doesn't know if it's like fans. So there's a lot going on in his personal life that is also uncommon to him and foreign just because of the fame that he's now experiencing. And he's also trying to build a relationship with this simple girl who is also coming out of something very extreme and very depressive. And I think the first half of the book was very focused on Sloane's progression and growth from her depression. And then the second half turned into the media circus of being like associated with someone who's famous. And that was the part that really triggered me and made me upset because I was like, I didn't care for that part of the book. I think it took away from Sloane's growth and Sloane's depression. But again, that being said, this is Abby Jimenez's second book. And I do think you can very clearly see the improvement in the writing. I think you can very clearly see her thought process on paper. I think the characters have a lot more depth than the first book did. So it was definitely fun to read. Like, don't get me wrong. I do think it was better than The Friend Zone, but I don't think it was like a work of perfection. So for me, this was like a solid 3.5 stars. Would I recommend it again to the whole world? No, but do you want something fun, easy to read? Then absolutely go for it. I do think it's an enjoyable novel. It does touch on difficult topics in society that are hard to address, such as depression, bereavement, loss of a loved one, as well as dealing with fame, relationships in general, communication, that type of thing. And so I do think she does a good job of weaving these kind of difficult topics into her novel, which I do appreciate. So if that's something you would be interested in, then I definitely do recommend reading the second book. I do think it was a lot of fun to read, and I do like the world that's been created in these books. I just don't think it had the same oomph for me that part of your world did. Moving on to the third book. So the third book was the only one where I felt like the characters weren't super involved with each other, in the sense that, you know, the main character in this book is very briefly introduced. Oh man, I'm sorry. Life's too short. That's the book we're looking for. But I think the main character in this book is like very briefly, minusculely explained and shown in the second book. And that was basically the only tie. But essentially, he is the cousin of the main guy from the first book. So he is a wonderful character. I think as far as the male characters go and the male character development goes, Life's Too Short was probably my favorite book of the three books. And I do think Adrian's character is the most fun to read. He has, I think, a lot more depth to him. He has a lot more things that he's trying to get over, abandonment issues, things like that he's dealing with. And it also talks about the personality type, where if you don't have a sense of control in your life, you might indulge in work, and you may overindulge in, trying to have that semblance of control in your life. So that was very interesting to read. I did enjoy Adrian's character from that perspective. The female lead character in Life's Too Short, Vanessa, is absolutely wonderful. She is basically a vlogger. She does travel vlogging, and the whole reason this started is because in her family, the females have had a rare genetic condition that has led to them dying early, and she is under the impression that this may be happening to her. She also has a dumpster truck fire going on as a family. Basically, everyone is like very messed up. Everyone has a difficult time taking responsibility for everything. There's very clearly love there, but she's dealing with a lot. She has an addict for a sister. She has a brother who's gone through business school and all this stuff, but doesn't really seem like he's keen on taking on a serious job, and she's dealing with her father being a hoarder. And so she's kind of just keeping her family together and her family alive, and suddenly her knocked up sister shows up at her doorstep, drops her baby off with her, and walks away and goes back to her drug abuse. And so it was a very interesting character to read, especially as she's grappling with concepts of her own mortality and her own sense of balancing home life versus the job that she's been doing, which is basically traveling everywhere. Not very conducive to having a child, obviously, and being at home trying to take care of that child. Also, I think the relationship between Adrian and Vanessa was very fun to read because there was a lot of friendship that was established between the two characters before the physical chemistry was explored, and I enjoyed that aspect of the book. I do think sometimes it's really hard to root for characters when there's only physical chemistry, or you don't really get to see the development of the relationship between the two characters. That's one thing I will give prompts to Abby Jimenez for, because I do think she takes an effort to really show the emotional connection and the banter between the characters. And so there's something to root for. One of the biggest frustrations I've had with other books is that I feel like it's just basically a man who's described as being tall, dark, handsome, with brooding and blue eyes, and I'm just like, I can't root for that. So I do appreciate that Adrian has a lot of depth to him. I do appreciate the fact that Vanessa has a lot of depth to her. I think the side characters really added to the book as well. It was fun to see their growth. It was fun to see their impact on Vanessa. Adrian being a criminal lawyer was also an interesting take on the book as well. So overall, I think the book was written very well. As far as the 3 books go, it was probably my favorite. I think Life's Too Short overall, I rated it a 3.5 to 4 stars. The only issue I had with this book is the fact that, once again, communication was the main issue between the two characters. And I think there was a certain level of taking it for granted that Vanessa does in terms of thinking, Adrian, I'm so sorry. In terms of thinking that Adrian is up to date on her medical history because of her vlogging and her channels, and the fact that she very openly talks about this condition on her channels. Whereas obviously Adrian, being a workaholic and just now connecting with another human being, having his own beef and abandonment issues that he's dealing with, and then also being a criminal lawyer who's working all the time, is not aware of. And so there's just this lack of communication between the two of them that I found very frustrating, because I think a lot of the drama that the two of them go through closer to the end of the book was highly unnecessary. But again, in romance novels, I feel like you need something in order to make the plot line entertaining and fun, and I do think Abby Jimenez does a good job of that. That being said, of the 3 books, I think this one was my favorite. I could definitely see that there's an improvement in the writing style. And so I can definitely see how this would have set the stage. These 3 books would have set the stage for something as beautiful and wondrous as the Part of Your World series. So overall, I guess what I'm trying to say is, while I didn't love this series as much as the Part of Your World series, which was a solid 5-star read for me across the board, I think these 3 books would be 3.5 put together all together, and that's not a terrible score. Like, it's definitely a fun read, and if that's something that would interest you, I strongly recommend it. But I wouldn't say that it was my favorite books of Abby Jimenez either. That being said, I think she's a brilliant author. I think she really brings to front some points that need to be discussed, societal, conditions that we may not be aware of, or emotions that are hard to express, or, you know, just things like depression and, you know, baggage from families and things like that. I think the way she talks about these things is very poetic and very beautiful, even in these 3 books. And so overall, I will definitely say any Abby Jimenez books that come out, I will probably read it and I will thoroughly enjoy it. And I hope that this review inspired you guys if you had any questions, and hopefully gives you some thoughts on those books as well. Didn't want to ruin anything too much for anybody, and so that's why I kind of put in that plug point earlier. But I do think it's a good series to read overall, and I would recommend Abby Jimenez to just about everyone. I do think I would probably recommend Part of Your World series more than the Friend Zone series, but I think both books were great. That being said, thank you so much for joining me today as part of the bookish community. I just love talking about anything books, and I'm so thankful that you guys are here to do that with me. The videos that I put out are basically meant to be time capsules and capture all these thoughts on books, and also give us a community where we can chat about books and talk about them and share our passion for books. So if you have any comments, thoughts on this, or if you have any feelings towards Abby Jimenez's books, or if you have any authors that you would like to recommend for me, please do let me know in the comments below, because I do enjoy reading everyone's comments when they post. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday, so if bookish talks are something that strike your fancy, please do consider staying with our community here and hitting that subscribe and that notification bell. If you are part of our online reading community already, thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.